Good afternoon. Let me mute that. Good afternoon. It is now 2:05, so thank you for being here. We have we have earlier than usual, but regular scheduled policy committee meeting. We have a quorum, Chair Mahaffey, Chris Haggerty. Committee members are here in the boardroom along with board member Karen Carter. Ms. Heather Scott is attending remotely, so we have a quorum. Ms. Cash and Dr. Martin will be joining us. They had previous commitments will be joining us at 2:30 or 3 at their earliest convenience. So we, after they finish with their previous commitments, so we will go ahead and get started. I hope everyone's had a chance to review the minutes from our January Policy Committee meeting. Are there any questions or concerns about the minutes?
Chair Kushner, at this time, I'd move adoption of the minutes of the previous meeting.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second by Mr. Haggerty, seconded by Ms. Mahaffey to approve the minutes. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries and the minutes are approved. So we will delve into what is a very long agenda. We were ambitious in January and had to postpone some of these items till today, so why don't we just go ahead and get started. Dr. Garner, so why don't you start us off? Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Good afternoon to all of you, Board Chair, Vice Chair, and Superintendent Moore, and members of the board. We're delighted to be with you this afternoon. Thank you for the adjustment you've made in your time so that we can meet. Our first policy is going to be students experiencing homelessness, and Paul Coe, Assistant Superintendent over Student Support Services, is going to be bringing that to us to walk us through the proposed revisions to this. Unfortunately, Mr. Pesh could not be with us this afternoon given some events occurring in the department, but very grateful to Paul for stepping in, and I will turn it over to him at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner. Good afternoon, Committee Chair Kushner, Superintendent Moore, and board members. We bring to you Board Policy 4125, Students Experiencing Homelessness, Students in Transition, as a revised policy. The revisions for this policy reflect updates made by the North Carolina School Boards Association and reviewed by our WCPSS attorney, who's joined here with us, Neil Ramey. The policy was presented at the January 25th Policy Committee meeting and is brought back with further revisions. And when given final board approval, it will replace the current policy. And before I review the changes, in Assembly, the attached file titled 22222 Policy Committee Meeting 4125 REV Post PC that is on the left of the web page includes the feedback we received from Policy Committee on January 25th. For the purposes of reviewing updates for this meeting, I will be referring to the file on the right side of the web page titled 22222 Policy Committee Meeting 4125 Attorney Review, just for your reference, so that we were all on the right file. So we're going to first begin with page 6. Under section E1B, we revised language to read, within one school day of learning of the complainant's disagreement, the homeless program liaison shall provide the complainant a copy of the school system's uniform rights and procedures that is written in a language, manner, and form intended to enable the complainant to understand the document to the extent the school system deems practicable. And then also for section E on page 6, 1B, item 4, we've revised the language to state a simple complainant form that a complainant can understand in that section. So I will pause there to see if there's any questions. Otherwise, I'll keep continuing. All right.
Any questions? Keep going. Thank you, Mr.
All right. And then next on page 7, under section E1B, items 6, 7, and 8 have revised language. Item 6 now reads, notice of the right to appeal or request an extension of the time to appeal the final decision of the school system to the state coordinator within 3 school days of the receipt of the final decision. Item 7 now reads, notice of the right to enroll immediately in the school located in the assignment area of the student's temporary residence or remain in the school of origin with transportation provided by the school system. And item 8 was revised to read, notice that the right to enroll includes the right to fully participate in all school activities. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Coe.
All right. And then now we'll move to page 8, still under section E, 2A, Roman numerals 4 and 5 have revisions. Roman numeral 4 now reads, no more than 2 school days after the complainant initiates the dispute resolution process, the homeless program liaison shall, 1, inform the superintendent, other school officials participating in the dispute resolution process, and the state coordinator of the dispute, and 2, provide a written decision including the reasons for the decision to the complainant and the superintendent. And Roman numeral 5 is now removed and was incorporated into Roman numeral 4. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions.
Good, thank you.
All right. Moving on to page 9, we're still under section E. 2C, Roman numeral 3 was revised. And Roman numeral 3 now reads, the board or a panel of at least 2 board members appointed by the chair and acting on behalf of the board will render a decision on the appeal. The next revision was the word will was added to the third sentence to read, the board or board panel will provide a written decision within 7 school days of receiving the appeal. The next edit was not exceed was added to the fourth sentence to read, in unusual circumstances, the board or board panel may extend this time but will not exceed the lesser of 1, 15 school days from when the complaint was received, or 2, 30 calendar days from when the complaint was received. And the following sentence was added to Roman numeral 3. In the event the board or board panel is unable to render a decision within the lesser of 1, 15 school days from when the complaint was received, or 2, 30 calendar days from when the complaint was received, the superintendent's decision shall serve as a school district's final decision for purposes of any appeal to the state coordinator. All right, looks like we're okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, we'll move on to page 10. We're still under section E, 2D, the first paragraph, Roman numeral 1, Roman numeral 3, and the final sentence have revisions. The first paragraph includes the phrase, or within the period of any extension granted. And then Roman numeral 1 is revised to read, the name of the complainant, and if available, his or her physical address, email address, and telephone number. Roman numeral 3, we remove the word specific, and the final sentence has the word supporting removed. And then to close, page 11 includes updated legal references, and we'll pause here for now. Any dialogue or questions?
Thank you, Mr. Coe. You've been captured a lot of our board concerns from last meeting, so thank you very much. Mr. Hegarty.
Just really quickly, I didn't see any additions on page 11 on my copy, but my copy is also appearing in a strange format.
Yeah, so Mr. Haggerty, I could just at least outline for you on page 11 some of the legal references, specifically 36916, NCAC 6H011. 42 is struck, and then 0115.0116 is added. And then the end of that, the legal references, State Board of Education policy is corrected with the IES removed and the SBOP 020 deleted.
Great, thank you. I see those. They appear on page 10 of mine. It's just
sorry about that.
No, just a difference in the formatting. Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Mr. Hegarty, thank you. And I think the overall thrust of all these changes is to bring more timeliness to the families and students who are experiencing homelessness and give them more flexibility and agency and making sure that they have some school stability. So thank you very much for capturing those concerns. Any further questions? Mr. Hegarty.
Well, just for discussion, I'd go ahead and submit a motion at this time for committee approval in reference to the recommendation to the board for first reading.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hegarty, second by Ms. Johnson-Hopper, to move this to full board for first reading. Action. Any further discussion or concerns about the revisions or thoughts? Very thorough. So without any further discussion, we have a motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Garner, our next up.
Our next one is Policy 3610. It relates to our counseling program. This is another one that we brought back just because of the extensive changes and the movement of language in different sections. So I'm delighted to have Crystal Reardon, Director of School Counseling, join us, and she's going to walk us through the policy and the proposed revisions, similar as Mr. Coe did for the students experiencing homelessness.
Thank you, Dr. Garner. Thanks for being here, Ms. Reardon. So we had to punt from last time. We appreciate your patience with us.
Glad to be back. Thank you. Committee Chair Kushner, Superintendent Moore, and members of the board. We're returning today to bring updated revisions to Policy 3610 counseling program. Updates are largely intended to consolidate the policy verbiage and to provide clear headings and readability. We presented this in the January Policy Committee meeting, but there were lots of mechanical changes and organizational changes. So I'll be presenting it today again, start to finish, so that we can identify those changes and have a more thorough discussion around those.
Thank you. We can save that.
So to
Thank you.
guide the conversation around the color coding that you see on your copy, the text has been color coded to assist in reviewing recommendations from the current policy to the proposed policy. Green text represents additions that the School Boards Association made, which would have previously been in red, and that WCPSS has recommended moving to a different part of this policy. So if it's in green, the text itself is not different. It's just been relocated from where the School Boards Association recommended initially. As always, the red text indicates additions or deletions that were made by the School Boards Association in their draft. Blue indicates additions or deletions made by WCPSS staff, which is standard. And in this particular draft, we also have purple. The purple indicates text that Wake County Public School System is recommending to delete, that the School Boards Association added. So it would have previously been in red. We're proposing a deletion, so it's in purple. As we review these proposed revisions, I do want to highlight that our comprehensive school counseling program is guided by essential standards approved by the State Board of Education and largely based on the American School Counselor Association's national model for school counseling. Much like classroom teachers and other instructional specialists, school counselors do follow a standard course of study when delivering services to students in classrooms, small groups, and as individuals, and they are evaluated by their principals and their accomplishments and professional growth against those standards. At this time, I will walk you through the updates and will pause as needed for questions or clarifications. When we start in the introductory paragraph, the language is updated to reflect current language and practice around preparing students for life after high school and the areas of focus for the comprehensive school counseling program. So the additions in red are from the School Boards Association, or the language that is in red with a strike through was prior language that the School Boards Association has recommended that we omit. The text highlighted in green in the second part of the introductory paragraph has been moved by the School Boards Association to the newly titled Section C, Academic Advising. So that section is new. The language is not changing, but it is being moved to a newly designated section. Any questions from the introduction?
I don't see any, but I think it does lend to a great deal of clarity. I'm sorry, Mr. Hager.
No, it wasn't a question. It was just a note of appreciation that, if you remember last time, there were so many changes to the policy. I'll confess it was very hard to understand what was your recommendation, what was the school board's recommendation, and where things are being moved to. I thought this was very clear, perfectly clear, and I understand all of the changes now.
Excellent. And Dr.
Thank you.
Crane played an instrumental role in designing the color coding, and so thanks to her for her Crayola magic.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Crane. And the key is, we need the key. Thank you very much.
It's helpful to me as well. So in Section A, the first paragraph, we updated in blue the phrase parental involvement plan to parental engagement plan per our conversation at the January meeting in order to align with language that's included in the school improvement plan, which is where our parent engagement plan is housed. In the second paragraph, the text in purple has been removed around the right to opt out of academic, career, or personal social counseling services of a generic nature. Our attorney has advised that this language from the North Carolina School Boards Association was connected to a general statute that speaks to medical services and is not directly related to the counseling program. And as previously indicated, the counseling program is guided by a general statute and a standard course of study that all students have a right to access. It's important to note that when programs or services extend beyond generic topics such as suicide prevention, human trafficking, or other specialized topics with students, then parents do have the opportunity through those program areas to have their child opt out of participation. The second part of this paragraph in green has been removed and moved to the newly created Section D, which is the safe surrender law. So again, text did not change in that move, but that's just an indication that the text was moved to a new section. Any questions after Section A?
All right, I don't see any. Keep on going.
Okay.
I'll check in with Ms. Scott.
In Section B, the first paragraph, language in red, has been moved by staff from third paragraph into the first paragraph to place the emphasis on the partnership between schools and families and the community. Language in green, strikeout, was moved to the second paragraph for alignment. Language in red was added by the School Boards Association. Green text was moved from above, and text in blue was added per the discussion with Policy Committee on January 25th. That if students have extensive needs or needs that go beyond the purpose of the counseling program, rather than school counseling referring students to community resources, we included that school counselors may communicate with families to refer students for community resources, again, to highlight that partnership with families, and at the suggestion of the Policy Committee. Second paragraph, new language is aligned with our current practices. Second part has been moved to Section E and is in alignment with general statute. Second paragraph, the text in green, strikeout, has been moved by the School Boards Association to the newly created Section E, employee mandatory reporting, not new language, just moved to a different location in the policy. Third paragraph, first statement, blue strikeout. Again, staff recommended moving that to the beginning to emphasize the partnership with families and the community. The second statement in red strikeout is now in the second paragraph above. Third statement in purple strikeout is removed based on guidance from attorney and in alignment with the goals of the comprehensive school counseling program. I'll pause for questions around Section D.
I think we're good. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Thanks, you all. Section C, D, E, and F are not new language, but they have been divided into separate headings for readability. So we've put the language in green because School Boards Association has approved this language, suggested this language. It's not new, but it has been moved from the current policy into these headings. The headings themselves are in red because the current policy does not have headings. So they've added these headings for Section C, D, E, and F. The red text in Section C is new language that is aligned with goals of the State Board of Education and with the Wake County Public School System. And that brings us to the end of Policy 3610. I would happily entertain any final questions.
Thank you, Ms. Reardon. And I do think the additions of Section C, D, and E bring a lot of clarity and make it easier to read. So thank you for facilitating that. And with that, any other questions for Ms. Reardon? Any concerns? The color coding does make it easy to follow, and knowing that the language is the same, and I think the reorganization does really help. So take that model forward, Dr. Crane. Thank you, ma'am.
Well, and of course, we appreciate the opportunity to come back and offer that
thank you.
clarification as well. This is an important policy, and I want to reiterate that I always appreciate the board's support around our school counseling programs.
Thank you, Ms. Reardon. We appreciate and have to acknowledge the fact that we need more of you, more counselors, more social workers, more social emotional health professionals, because our students have, the pandemic's been hard on our students. That's an understatement, but it needs to be said and acknowledged that your department does so much to help support students and staff, so thank you. And it's good to be able to have that opportunity to say that with this policy.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if there's no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion to send this revised policy 3610 to the full board for action and approval on first reading.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. And any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And thank you, Mr. Ramey. I didn't introduce, Mr. Neil Ramey is here supporting our committee. And since Mr. Blumberg couldn't be with us, we appreciate all the work you always do with policy, Mr. Ramey. So thanks for being here today. For my delayed acknowledgement, sir. But
In the introduction, we have eliminated language that requires schools only issue a pass or fail for students who have been long-term suspended or expelled. This is in keeping with the board's efforts to have a code of conduct that is positive and student-centered. We've removed this language to be in more alignment with that, give students the opportunity to post grades that they have earned during that time. In section A, we removed language referencing the 2009-2010 school year at the beginning, as that timeline clarification was simply no longer necessary. Paragraph 2, we make more explicit reference to other Wake County Board policies that are relevant to earning credits and accessing rigor within the process of earning the credits necessary to graduation, to graduate, again, to make it more user-friendly for our stakeholders. In paragraph 4, you see some updates to state board policy references that more clearly articulate the importance of academic counseling for our students to ensure they remain on track towards their graduation goals. It also notes, I believe, that the state board policy is always supersedes anything we have locally that always needs to be set. Paragraph 5, there is a wording change, again, in the vein of being better communicators, that simply seeks to say graduation plan instead of schedule, because we believe schedule often to students means their period 1, 2, 3, 4 that they have at any given time, and graduation plan speaks more to the spirit of that language, which is the 4-year graduation plan. And then finally, in section A, the last part of that section, we update language to mirror current course requirements, specifically the update from Algebra 2 to Math 3, and a reference to let them know where they can locate information about those minimum admission requirements should they choose to. And at this time, we'll pause and see if you have any questions with the introduction in section A.
all right, are there any questions from board members? And I keep checking on you, Ms. Scott. I just want to make sure I'm looking at, see if you have your hand raised. Any concerns? And we should note that also in our materials, this might not be a great, it's good time as any, that the high school program planning guide is attached with all the detail from the high schools in our material. So I appreciated having the ability to look through that as I was looking at policy. So thank you for having that there. So
Ms. Kushner, this is
absolutely
Heather
does.
Scott.
No, go ahead,
And
Heather.
sorry, and I don't have a question, but I couldn't hear any, I don't know if a microphone was off or it's just a problem coming through on WebEx. And I just wanted to know, I couldn't hear the discussion over the last couple minutes until you started talking.
That was in part, I had my mic off, I'm sorry, Ms. Scott, and they did let me know, so I apologize for that.
I apologize, Ms. Scott, is that better?
Yes, that is perfect. I'm nearly there, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, in section B, you'll note that there are not any changes for us to note. Section C focuses on some special circumstances.
In item 1, we better articulate a connection with policy 3450, which discusses class ranking and Latin honor system. We also acknowledge that individual schools have important traditions and honors that are unique to their school culture that are important to be recognized as well, and schools can certainly do that. Skipping down to item number 5 in that section, we remove some outdated language in that section. One speaks to the timing of the graduation ceremony, and the other speaks to information on how to access transcripts. Currently, many of our transcripts are electronic and free to students, so that reference is just dated, and we wanted to pull it since it was no longer accurate information. Item 6 reflects language from the School Board Association related to diploma endorsements and how they can gain more access to that through the high school program planning guide. Remaining changes are updates to legal references. And at this time, happy to take any other questions or feedback you may have about this policy.
Thank you, Mr. Pittman. So with that, I open it up to board members for any questions or concerns.
Prior to your discussion, I'll just add, in case you see a copy of this policy in another district's manual, the School Board Association recommends placing different graduation plans in the policy. We do not. We struck that the first when we migrated this policy, and we do not choose to include that. The program planning guide lists graduation requirements for each of our high schools, and our high schools have varying requirements. So because we have that listed in our program planning guide, I wanted to make sure that you were not surprised if you looked at another district's policy and saw those charts there and wondered why we did not have them. That is the rationale behind that.
Thank you, Dr. Crane. Thank you. And again, I think it speaks to how long, how many high schools we have, how broad variety of high schools, given the choices that we allow families and students to have at the high schools. And that's I think one of our more exciting innovations is that the different high school offerings we have. So thank you for that. And I appreciate the focus the district has on high school graduation. That is, since our last strategic plan, been our audacious goal and been a key focus of the pre-K to 12 continuum in Wake counties to get our students across. That's our final product, right? Getting students across the stage. So thank you, Mr. Pittman, for giving us this update and the refinement of the policy on graduation requirements. So are there any further comments or questions from board members? We're being efficient in this meeting, y'all, so thank you. So with hearing no further discussion, I'll entertain a motion to move revisions for policy 3460, graduation requirements, from the committee to the full board for approval on first reading.
So moved, Ms. Kushner.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. Motion by Ms. Mahaffey, second by Ms. Johnson-Hostler. Any further discussion or questions?
Ms. Kushner, I think this just shows the preparedness of our staff and their thoroughness and preparation for today.
I would agree, very much so. And listening and already anticipating our concerns. It's great. We're grateful. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So we'll move on. Thank you all for that. Moving on to similar vein in high school programs, revisions to being presented for R&P on policy 3460, acceptance of high school transfer credit. Mr. Pittman, Ms. Reardon.
So thank you again for the opportunity to talk through this. This R&P for policy 3460 focuses on the transfer of high school credits. Our goal in these updates is, number one, the migration to join the new policy and the new manual, and two, to clean up language to better reflect current practices and streamline the work of schools. In the first section, we reference that credit for courses will be weighted in alignment with state board policy as opposed to naming specific course types such as honors and AP. The state board policy acknowledges other things, categories that are weighted, and we thought better than listing all of those out to just tag that to the state board policy so that R&P continues to evolve as state board policy does as well, making us always hopefully more current. In the next few sections, you're going to see a number of strike-throughs that are related to the same thing. In the old RNP, Section 2 talked about the difference of transferring credits for magnet versus non-magnet courses. In reality, we do not transfer magnet and non-magnet courses any differently. And so the elimination of the text in Section 2, as well as the minor change in what's the new Section 2 and the new Section 3, I believe, those changes are all reflecting that we have no difference in the way we transfer credit between magnet and non-magnet, and so we streamlined the language to make that easier for schools and users. In Section 4, we've updated language related to homeschool credit to better align with other state board policies and procedures. Specifically, the change here is to strike the phrase, the total number of contact hours per course, and to change that to work samples. That is more in alignment with other state policies and more accurate for what is actually happening in our schools when they evaluate credits coming from homeschools. In the following section, 3460.5, we've updated the language to reflect current practice for receiving credit as a part of a study abroad program. This outlines a process that should be consistent across schools while also streamlining it from our former process to be more consistent with the way that we typically would transfer in credit. For example, item C that was removed in the past would have said that credits from study abroad would not be counted towards GPA or class rank. That was an inconsistency with the way we transfer other credits, and so this puts that more into alignment so we have streamlined processes for our schools and families. With the section formerly labeled 5535.7, I'm going to refer you back to our previous discussion with the policy and the elimination of language around grade penalties related to long-term suspension and expulsion. This removal is aligned with that policy update. In the new section 6, 3460.6, here we're making intentional connections within this document to other policies and RMP that families or students may find most helpful. For example, here the connection to our dual enrollment policy and its related RMP, as this RMP and that one would often be working hand in hand to make it easier for our families. And then finally, in the final section, we've eliminated text simply to streamline wording and make it clearer. The text that we've eliminated doesn't change meaning or intent, it just makes it clearer. At this time, we're certainly happy to take feedback and questions for improvement.
Thank you, Mr. Pittman.
And because this is RMP, we don't have to send this.
Correct,
Yeah.
right. So this is just presented for our information, and if there's questions or concerns for either Mr. Pittman or any of the staff regarding this reflecting more our practice. So
Yes, ma'am.
So,
Ms. Mahaffey, we wanted to bring them together as joint documents so that you could see the alignment across. You're right, RMP does not have to go to board for board approval as a first or second read, but we wanted to show the changes so that you could ask questions if you have any in alignment with the policy that you just reviewed.
And it definitely helped in the policy review in addition to the documents that were put with the policy to see that alignment and to see the intent and what goes into practice. So I appreciate that.
yeah, thank you. Mr. Hegarty.
Thank you. So this is just a procedural question. I notice sometimes we'll get a policy or rules and procedures, and we'll ask about the origin, and the origin might be, well, we're required to do this by state law. And whether we had the policy or didn't have the policy, we'd be required to do it because it's state law, but we still go through, and then we spell everything out. But like in this case, for example, you say, well, we'll in 3460.1, weighted credit for all courses, and we just cite to another state policy. So how do you make the decisions, sort of when something should be spelled out, like in very detailed description, and when it should just be referred to, when you should just refer to another existing policy or another existing rule?
I would defer somewhat to Dr. Crane, but I think in many cases, I think that part of our effort in that was to be sure that the RMP remains as current as possible. And I think that there are at times changes, as we saw several years ago, in how those weights occur and what that looks like and how they transition in and out. And so sometimes I think during those periods of transition, it's good to link to a more consistent source. Although I will say that all of the information around this is also articulated in the high school program planning guide that you also received, which is what we often will refer students and families to as we talk about these topics.
I appreciate that answer. So people, if they're looking for this, there's other redundant sources of information, others that they might encounter before coming here, and it's not just redirecting them somewhere else.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Haggerty. Any questions, other questions or concerns for staff? All right. Thank you for bringing this forward, because we do get, I mean, especially closer we get to graduation, we can anticipate some questions from parents and concerns from families and students about transfers and how it means for class rank and how did that fella get ahead of my child and all that. So this is helpful information for us to have.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So moving on, we've got revisions coming to policy 6400, goals of the purchasing functions. To switch gears a little bit. And we have Mark Winters, Deborah Wallace here with us. Thank you for being here this afternoon.
Okay. Thank you, Committee Chair Kushner, Superintendent Moore, and board members. Got to say, I'm a little surprised I'm up here this early. Y'all are moving quickly.
We're trying to going against, we're going against type.
Mr. Winters, we can.
Yeah. So, we could take a break if you want, some coffee.
I'm good.
Yeah, we're moving right along.
Okay, so
Maybe
we
it's
have-
because of Mr. Ramey. Don't tell Mr. Blumberg that. But.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so there's two policies we want to discuss today. The first one's Board Policy 6400, the goals of purchasing function. This policy's part of the migration. It's created by the School Boards Association as part of their Policies to Lead Schools manual. And when the board has final approval, it will replace current policy 8304, vendor relations. So if we take a look at 6400, this is a short policy, so I'll go through it quickly. The Wake County Board of Education is committed to using its authority to purchase goods and services in a manner most likely to help students succeed. The board superintendent and any other employees authorized to participate in purchasing decisions or purchasing process will strive to meet the following goals. So it's a list of 5 goals: obtaining the maximum benefits from all school system monies and furthering the educational goals of the board, conducting all purchasing activities according to laws, rules, regulations, and good purchasing practices and ethical principles, and we'll talk about ethics in just a moment in the next policy. Providing a climate of fair and open competition for all qualified vendors, requiring satisfactory and proper performance of all contractual obligations of the vendors, and providing prompt and courteous service while maintaining professional relationships with staff, vendors, and related stakeholders. We had a slight change to the policy on number 5. It originally stated courteous service to the school personnel, other governmental entities, and vendors. It's our thought that the vendor should be giving us good service as they are accepting our money for their service. So we tweaked that last item a little bit, and we'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Winters. And this is always something from the school level. We do make sure that we're overseeing things, but making sure that we also stay in our lane on all of this. So any questions on the proposed changes to goals of the purchasing function as opposed to vendor relations?
Right.
Yes,
And
Dr.
we will
Gardner.
say this is the first policy in the next series, the 6400 series, that talks about the purchasing function. So this is that introductory policy that lays
Okay.
out the goals. And as we move through the other policies, we'll get down into more granular level in the operation of the purchasing function.
Thank you for that reminder, Ms. Crane. So this is meant to be just the overview. Thank you. Any questions as we get started down the 6,000 series, 6,400 series? All right, with hearing no questions, I'll entertain a motion to take these revisions and migration of policy 6,400, goals of the purchasing function, to replace our previous policy of vendor relations.
So moved.
Thank you, sir.
Second?
There's a motion from Mr. Hegarty, second by Ms. Johnson-Hostler, to move 6,400 revisions to the full board for approval on first reading. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So we'll go ahead and take that forward to the board for full
Okay,
action.
thank you.
Mr. Winters, and we'll move on to the first fuller policy, ethics, and the purchasing function, revisions to new policy 6401.
Okay, and similar
Scott.
to 6400, this policy also is a replacement of vendor relations, and it's interesting that the last revision was in 1992 of vendor relations.
So it was time, sir. Okay, good.
Yes, it's nearing the end. Similar to 6400, this is a policy created by the School Boards Association and is part of the policy migration project. This is a little bit lengthy, so I am not going to do as I did in the first one and read through all of this. I'll just touch on some highlights as we go through it, and as you read it. The opening paragraph requires that all employees, the board, the superintendent, and all employees involved must comply with current state and federal laws and regulations. The purchasing goals and principles, which we mentioned previously, will not be compromised by individuals motivated by personal gain. Much of this policy will discuss personal gain. It's sort of divided into sections, and we'll talk about that. And again, it speaks to for purchase of any goods, we must follow these standards of conduct. Any employee must do this. So number one speaks to employees who are expected to make all purchases related to decisions, purchasing related decisions in a neutral and objective way, and not in consideration of actual or potential personal benefit. And you'll see this throughout this policy. Section 2, they shall not participate directly or indirectly in making or administrating a contract in which they will gain benefit. It speaks to a definition of what a direct benefit is, where an employee or his or her spouse will receive income, commission, or property under the contract if the spouse has more than a 10% interest in the entity that is a party to the contract. The last section speaks to this again, that participation includes development of the specifications or contract terms, attaining or reviewing bids, preparation or award of the contract, or having the authority to make decisions about, interpret, or oversee the contract. So it covers all realms of the contract. Section 3 speaks to a similar piece of the contract dealing more with a federal grant or award, that no one has real or apparent conflict of interest, and it speaks to what a real or apparent conflict exists for an employee when his or her family member, partner, organization once again receives benefit, and it delegates that for a financial interest for a federal contract compromises more than 5% of the equity of the firm or business that owns the contract. Section 4, employees shall not influence or attempt to influence anyone involved in administering the contract. Section 5 speaks to employees not soliciting or receiving gifts, favors, rewards, service, or promise of a reward, including promise of future employment in exchange for recommending, influencing, or attempting to influence the award of a contract. Section 6 requires notification to the superintendent or designee in writing if they have any actual or potential conflict of interest. Section 7 again speaks to soliciting trips, meals, gratuities, gifts, favors, anything of monetary value within the past year from the contractor, subcontractors, or suppliers. And it actually puts a price of $50, considered a nominal value, which is a question that we do receive sometimes. If something happens within our school system, what is considered a nominal value? And it's $50. And it's also, you're able to accept an advertising item or souvenir that was widely distributed, an honorarium for participating in the meeting, a meal at a banquet. Multiple permitted items from a single contractor may not exceed an aggregate value of $100. All vendors, contractors, subcontractors should be notified of these restrictions. Similar, number 8, it speaks to soliciting a gift from E-rate services or providers. Number 9 shifts from gifts to divulging confidential information to any unauthorized person and lists what is considered confidential information. Cost estimate prior to bidding or completion of other competitive purchasing process, the identity of contractors who obtain proposals for bid for a public contract until the bids are opened in public and recorded. We also see this issue quite a bit today, where someone wants to know who has bid for a contract that we are releasing, and we will not share that until the bids are open. Then it becomes public information. Number 10 speaks to misuse of information. Employees shall not, in contemplation of the employee's own official action or that of the board or others acting on behalf of the school system, they shall not acquire financial interest in any property or transaction, gain a financial benefit that may be affected by the information or contemplated action, or intentionally aid another to acquire financial interest or to gain financial benefit. And then the last paragraph lists different areas that the superintendent or designee shall ensure all personnel are aware of board policies such as board member conflict of interest, federal grant administration prohibition against retaliation. And we speak to any policy that's related to employee conflict of interest, because at this time in the new policy guidelines, we do not have a conflict of interest. Is that correct, Julie? Yeah. So at some point, we will have that policy number. But right now, we just say any policy related to conflict of interest. And again, that's replacement of 8304, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Winters. And
Ms. Kushner, if I make it might,
Absolutely.
if I could just
Thank
briefly
you.
comment that the vast majority of this policy is required by state or federal statute or regulation. So you really don't, you have to do it whether your policy says so or not. Not a lot of wiggle room there. 2 exceptions I'll just point out are in section 7 of the policy. Mr. Winters referenced that $50 limit for nominal value gifts and the $100 aggregate. That's not strictly required in all cases. The board could change it, but I do think it's what the school board recommends, and I agree because it's not a number out of a hat. It's a safe harbor under some of the federal rules, and it's just a good logical place to put your limit. But just for your information. And then finally, the last sentence of subsection 7, the School Boards Association has marked as optional. That's not legally required, but I certainly don't have any problem with it. Just wanted to let you know that's almost the entire rest of the policy is required by law.
Thank you, Mr. Ramey. And as Mr. Winters opened with, we hadn't made those updates since '92, so it's good for us to be doing this now. Thank you.
In 1992, we did not have a written nominal value. We used $25.
Okay, so it's doubled since '92. Okay.
Right.
Well, that's all right. Any questions from board members, committee members? I actually had a few questions, and I wanted to know how do we, maybe this is a question for Ms. Wallace, how do we communicate this to our employees, and how often do we go over some of the already in practices, and how will we convey this new policy to our staff and board members as well?
Thank you. One of the things that we're really trying to do is update our access for everyone to our websites. We do include language in all of our formal bidding that includes ethics policies and our do's and our don'ts, so to speak. A lot of times the vendors will come back and ask us, why are you telling us about your employee ethics policy versus telling us what we should be doing? Well, you know, if we're doing it the right way, we're just echoing that to them. So we do try to do that through meetings with bookkeepers and training. And as far as my staff, we meet once a week for a minimum of an hour, going over new changes and reemphasizing things to make sure we remember to do. But it's difficult, this large of a system, to be able to reach everyone out there who's touching procurement in some piece. But we do make sure that we have it listed out there and we direct people to the website.
Thank you, Ms. Wallace.
And I will add that Ms. Wallace's staff participates in most bids, bid openings, and decision-making. So we have someone with knowledge sitting in the room when we open those bids, which also gives us this benefit.
Which, I'm sorry,
Well, it gives us the benefit of having the knowledge of these laws. You have someone sitting in the room with full knowledge when we have purchasing staff sitting with the opening of a bid.
excellent. Thank you, Thank you both for that. And Mr. Ramey, do you think we'll need to just keep an eye on that $50 and the $100 amounts to adjust them going forward so that we don't?
No, I think it's a very
Thank you.
reasonable number to include. I was just pointing out that you could reduce it or increase it slightly. If you were to increase it, you just have to be mindful that in some cases, $50 and $100 are the limits
Right.
in some particular instances. So I think it's a good threshold. Is just pointing out if you wanted to tweak that number in theory, you could.
Well, and having a number, I think we need just to keep an eye on the
Sure.
amounts, the fact that we have a specific number, and leave that to staff just to maintain that we keep an eye on it, and so we don't fall behind
Sure.
in what we should be doing and how we should be valuing
Agreed.
items. Thank you. Any other questions or concerns for staff? And we'll look forward to seeing the rest of these 6,400 series, because this is, we have to have with great clarity and intentionality how we do a great job with the taxpayers and the public dollars that we do receive, because I think we do need to have high standards for how we communicate our values to the public, and also lift up the work that you all are already doing that we have in practice in this school system. So thank you very much for bringing the beginnings of that series to us today. So any other questions for staff? If not, I'll entertain a motion to take the new policy 6401, ethics and purchasing function of the school system, forward to the board for approval and for first reading.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Hegarty. Motion by Mr. Hegarty, second by Ms. Johnson-Hostler. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And so we'll take that forward to the board. And with so much time to spare, Dr. Garner, got anything else for us today?
Well, I actually do have something I would like to
Okay.
share, if you don't mind. I may have the opportunity.
Please,
We
sir.
did work through that really well as far as our agenda items. We thought some may generate a lot more discussion, but maybe this will give you great transition time between this meeting and the special called board meeting.
Thank you.
But as we close, if you may allow me the opportunity to recognize and express deep appreciation to Cindy Kinney, who has diligently taken minutes for our policy committee meetings over the years. I've had the distinct honor of having her serve as my secretary for my entire career. And effective
how
Monday,
special.
she is retiring.
Oh, my word.
And I want to just thank her for her dedicated service to our district, to you as a board, and to the policy committee. And I just want to take this opportunity to recognize her for her work.
Kind of hurts my heart to
It
hear
hurts
that
mine, too.
today. I can't imagine, Mr. Garner. Dr. Garner, what are we going to do?
I'm seeking a lot of therapy.
Well, Well earned,
No.
and thank you, Ms.
No.
Kinney, for your service to this committee, to our entire school system, to Dr. Garner, for your decades of service. Thank you so much. They're just it's always inspiring. These Wake County, our employees who are so dedicated to the system. We lift you up, and we thank you, ma'am, for everything you've done.
And she has indeed, and I'm so grateful for her.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to have that opportunity.
No, we appreciate it. We could take the next hour if you'd like to do that. So
Maybe you can use the time to
we
get ready.
appreciate you all. Thanks so much.
Thank
And
you.
thanks to this committee for the great work. We got a lot done in an hour, so we can get ready for our next functions this evening. So with that, is there any further discussion or concerns going forward for the policy committee? But hearing none, this committee meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.